I cared for my mum with Alzheimer's for over a decade, and I think one of the biggest reasons that caregivers remain hidden is that many people just don't see themselves as caregivers. So, in this video, I'm going to cover why that is. I'm going to look at the 7 barriers of why so many people don't see themselves as caregivers, even when they've been doing the job for years. Because really, if you don't see yourself as a caregiver, how would you know that you're entitled to support? How would you know about a carer's assessment? How would you know about that there are organisations that are out there that can help you with services and benefits? They're designed specifically for caregivers to help them when they need it. That's why it's so important that you identify yourself as a caregiver. So let's get into it. Let's talk about what the biggest reasons are. The biggest reason I think, or I believe, is that you don't see a role, you see a relationship. I don't think people, including myself, think of themselves as a caregiver. Instead, what happens is that the role sort of kind of creeps up on us. It starts with maybe a few extra phone calls, maybe you're helping to manage some appointments, maybe you're doing the shopping, maybe you're sorting out their medications for the day. Or it could be that you're handling, the paperwork for them because that's become more difficult. And then before you know it, your life has changed. Yet, if someone asked you if you were a caregiver, you would probably say no. And I think that's one of the reasons so many caregivers remain hidden in our society because we don't see ourselves as that. We're daughters helping mum, we're sons helping dads, we're husbands looking after wives, we're parents supporting children. We're focused on the people that we love, not on what, our role might be called. And so when the relationship comes first, the word caregiver does not even enter your head. It's really love, really. You're less likely to stop and think about what you're actually doing, that I'm providing care here, that I'm a caregiver. And that's the sad thing. It doesn't mean, well, no, it's a sad thing because you miss out on the support that was built specifically for you. There are people out there that can help us. And if you don't recognize yourself as a caregiver, how is that going to happen? So, the second barrier is self determination. Self identifying as a caregiver is so important because of all that support. It depends on you identifying yourself first. And let's be honest, as I said, you don't see yourself that way. And the current system relies on us, on people identifying themselves. And you've seen that it can take years, sometimes decades, for people to realize that. So every doctor's appointment, every school interaction, every missed work situation, every community get together, every emergency call that you've had to make is a missed opportunity to say to someone, what you're doing has a name and there's support out there for you. Let me turn it around a little bit so that you maybe understand what I'm saying. If somebody asked you whether you help your mum or your dad with shopping or an appointment or medication, you probably immediately will just say yes. Yes? You would, wouldn't you? But if somebody asked you whether you support your husband because of a health condition, you'd probably say yes as well. But ask someone whether they are a caregiver, and suddenly there's like this hesitation. But the reality is the responsibilities haven't changed. It's only the label that has changed here. So that's why there needs to be more interventions really in place within our communities, within our schools, within our work situations, our healthcare systems, really to help people identify themselves as caregivers. So the third reason people don't identify as caregivers, again, I believe people simply don't identify because they have a picture in their head of what, a caregiver looks like. Let's call it, myths and perceptions of what a caregiver actually looks like. Maybe it's you think of someone who lives with the person. like I did. Maybe it's someone who's providing hands-on care every single day. Maybe it's someone who's given up work. But really, caregiving doesn't always look like that at all. So let's clear this up right now. You can be a caregiver even if you don't live with the person, even if you're working full time, it doesn't disqualify you. Even if you're sharing the responsibilities with somebody else, your siblings or friends, even if only you do it part time or one day here and one day there, you might live around the corner from them, you might live miles away from them. All of those things doesn't mean you're not a caregiver. If you're the person who's organising appointments, sorting out the paperwork, doing the shopping, managing the healthcare, the medications, speaking to professionals on their behalf, or dealing with emergencies, you are a caregiver then. If you provide emotional, physical, financial, or psychological support to help a loved one, psychological support to help a loved one, you are a caregiver. It's about the support that you provide someone who couldn't manage well without you doing that. The fourth reason is the confusion around the role. The When you hear caregiver, many of us picture a paid care worker. We think of professionals, paid carers, people who are working in care homes, someone with a uniform maybe, someone who has set hours and holiday pay. And the reality is that's the complete opposite of unpaid caregiver or carer. But the two terms get used interchangeably all the time, even by politicians who really should know the difference. You hear it on the news sometimes. So it's no wonder people hear the word caregiver and they think, that's not me. That's just a job title. So if the public are confused by it, it's not surprising that family caregivers are also confused too, and then don't identify themselves as caregivers. Which leads me in really nicely to the fifth barrier, you know? Well, another barrier to identifying as a caregiver is the language about caregiver. It's all over the place, really. There's no single consistent term. You've probably noticed even in this discussion that we're having here that I've used carer and caregiver interchangeably. And that's because I'm trying to include everyone and also because the language itself is just confusing. Think about it. Are you an informal carer? Are you an unpaid carer? Are you a parent carer? Are you a care partner? Are you a sandwich carer? Are you a young carer? There's no sort of consistent sort of term depending on where you live, who you're talking to, which leaflet you picked up that day. You might see a completely different word. And, for some people, none of those words feel right anyway. Especially if you think about if you've stepped away from a career, a full-time job, being called an informal carer can feel like it kind of diminishes everything you actually do. There's also the term, being a caregiver versus a care partner. That one is a big sticking point, in the community as well. And sometimes people reject the role or the term, because they disagree with it. They reject it because it just doesn't feel like it describes their relationship. I've heard people say, things like, I'm not a caregiver, I'm just helping my dad, or I'm just looking, after my husband. So I think that's another reason so many people never really identify as caregivers. The word itself feels too formal or too disconnected from what they do every day. And so if the word itself doesn't fit, people don't reach for it and they don't use it, and then they lose out on the support that they need. The sixth barrier, I think, is cultural expectation. In many cultures, looking after your family isn't seen as a role at all. It's just what you do. It's a duty, it's love. It's not viewed as a separate role that needs a label or sits outside of the family. And there's nothing wrong with that. But it can mean, again, people never look beyond the family unit for support, even when that support could make a real difference in their lives and in the lives of the person that they care for. And so, despite cultural expectations, you still need to be able to say that I am a caregiver. That's why it's important to identify as a caregiver. But there's one final barrier that I think is really worth mentioning, and that's fear. Fear of being labeled a caregiver can cause some people to worry. It does. It could affect, for example, their job or their career prospects. For adult carers, employment protections now exist and unpaid carers leave is available in the UK. But that doesn't stop the worry. It doesn't disappear the concern just because a law says that it should be. We know from, people who take time out to have children how that affects their careers. And then you have young carers especially who fear, what might happen to them if they tell someone they're trying to look after their mum or dad and keep the family unit going. They may fear child authority stepping in. They may be scared of, telling their friends about it because they're worried about being bullied. And that really matters, for young carers because in the long lasting impact on their education and their mental health. And I have seen firsthand how having an ambassador or an advocate for carers in organisations can help. I've heard from young carers who've identified themselves in schools where they have a young carer advocate in place to help them. I've seen organisations like the TSB Bank, a financial bank here in the UK, that has stepped up to offer carers passports so that they only have to identify themselves once to their management team that they're carers. And they're also one of the few organisations that have introduced not just paid leave, carers leave, but paid carers leave. So when they need it, they can take time out for an appointment or a hospital, emergency without affecting them. There just needs to be more organisations and people that do that. And that's where we're missing, really. So those are my 7 barriers that I believe. And when I look through it all, what strikes me about them all is that the problem usually isn't that people don't want to identify as caregivers, it's that they don't see themselves in the word itself. They're focusing so much on the person they love. And that's why I think we need to start, asking better questions. Not are you not are you a caregiver, but who depends on you? Who do you regularly help because of an illness or a disability or a mental health condition or an age-related problem? Who would struggle without your support in their daily lives? Because the answer to that question will identify you as a caregiver. You are caring for someone, and you may already be doing that without realizing that you are a caregiver, like I was. And if you know that, it will give you a key to unlock the support in the community and the resources that exist for people like you that we've been trying to build on year and year in, year out, exactly for people who are in your position. So tell me, I want to hear from you. Were you one of the people who took years to realize you were a caregiver? What was your sort of aha moment? Let me know. Write in the comments down below your story. It might be the exact thing that someone else needs to hear right now. So I hope this is helpful. Take care of yourselves. If you have a moment, watch my series on somewhere up here on caregiver truths. And I will see you in the next video. Sorry. Take care. Bye.